ADR. Promoting dialogue.
It's 6 p.m. in Dakar, 7 o'clock in Lagos. Good evening, and many thanks for staying tuned to West Africa Democracy Radio Broadcasting on 94.9 FM and around the world on wadr.org. Welcome to Newslink. Here are the top stories. Senegal's former ruling party, APR, denounces travel ban on several features of Macky Sall's regime. Victims of stadium stampede accuse Guinean authorities of being responsible for the death of their loved ones.
We have decided to file a complaint because we have observed the total refusal of the state to come to the aid of the injured victims.
A new World Bank report says Liberia risks further economic stagnation and increasing exposure to external shocks. And a new movement emerges to fight corruption in Togo.
The first objective is to fight for the liberation of political prisoners so that they can safely return home without condition. We need an inclusive transition to be able to take care of all the Togolese.
These stories and more are coming up shortly.
Here is Augustine Coley with Newslink.
Many thanks for joining our broadcast and welcome to our listeners in the Gambia, Ghana, Liberia and Sierra Leone. This edition begins right here in Senegal as the former ruling party Alliance for the Republic, APR, denounces the travel ban imposed on several prominent officials of former President Macky Sall's regime. The latest travel ban was imposed on Mansour Faye, former minister and brother-in-law of Macky Sall, while he was attempting to travel to Mecca. As a reminder, Masoud Faye's management of the COVID-19 relief funds was criticized by a report from the Court of Auditors in 2022. While no investigation has been officially announced, the Senegalese League for Human Rights is calling for respect for the freedom of movement. Meanwhile, the Senegalese National Assembly has adopted a bill to ratify the convention between Dakar and Rabat concerning assistance to detained persons and the transfer of sentenced persons. The ratification, jointly presented by the Foreign Affairs Committee and the Law Committee, now awaits President Bassirou Diomaye Faye's approval. This agreement originally signed in Rabat on December 17, 2004, provides a legal framework for consular protection and streamlines the process of transferring prisoners between the two nations. At the floor of the chambers, several MPs, including Aissata Tall Sall of the ruling Benno Yaka coalition, reiterated that the law does not target former President Macky Sall, who lives in Morocco, contrary to speculations. Christopher Aticho reports.
The Senegalese Minister of Foreign Affairs highlighted the significance of the agreement in enhancing bilateral judicial cooperation and providing better protection for Senegalese citizens incarcerated in Morocco. While parliamentarians generally supported the measure, they voiced concerns regarding the existing conditions of detention and the significant delay in its ratification, given that the agreement was established over 2 decades ago. The convention set out procedures for transferring convicted persons and providing consular assistance to prisoners. It specifies the modalities for the execution of sentence and the conditions for the transfer, which may be requested by the prisoner, the state that sentenced him, or the state that administered him. As a general rule, the Senegalese state will bear the bulk of the cost unless the parties agree otherwise. Currently, around 299 Senegalese individuals are held in various prisons across Morocco, mainly for offenses related to irregular migration, drug trafficking, and other criminal activities. Morocco serves as a crucial transit point for many sub-Saharan migrants seeking to reach Europe, including Senegalese nationals who often find themselves in precarious situations.
Christopher, a teacher with that report. Let's cross over to the Republic of Guinea, where a complaint has been filed against senior civil and military officials. The Nzirikore Stampede Victims Group accuses the transitional authorities of being responsible for the stampede at the Nzirikore Football Stadium, which cost the lives of their loved ones. On December 1, 2024, in Nzirikore, a stampede at the city stadium during a football match in honor of General Mamadi Doumbouya left 56 dead, according to the government, while NGOs put the death toll at 120. Echiatisu has the details in this report.
The families of the victims are targeting the ministers of youth, sports and agriculture, the governor, the prefect and the mayor of the city of Nzirikore, as well as the organizing committee of the tournament for the General Mamadi Doumbouya Trophy. Paul Lazare Bilimu, the victim's lawyer, explains what motivated the action.
We have decided to file a complaint because we have observed the total refusal of the state to come to the aid of the injured victims. We have also filed a complaint against known individuals identified who are supposed to be involved in this tragedy that has claimed many lives.
The day after the tragedy, the government set up an investigation commission to determine responsibilities. The final report was recently submitted to the head of government. However, the victims' lawyers dispute the content of this report.
We tell you that no victim's parent has been received by this inquiry commission. It is necessary for the victims and the parents of the victims to be directly involved for this report to be considered credible.
As a reminder, on Monday, the president of the transition issued a decree dismissing the governor, the prefect, and the president of the special delegation of Nzirikore.
That was Echiatisu voicing a report filed by our Conakry correspondent, Chanu Alpha Ibrahim Ambalde. Let's travel to the Sahel region, particularly Mali, where Dauda Magassa has regained its freedom after 1 month of being kidnapped by unidentified men. Calls for the release of this close associate of Imam Mahmoud Deko were made in Bamako. As a reminder, Dauda Magassa was kidnapped while actively preparing the aborted return to Bamako of the influential religious leader Mahmoud Deko, who had been at odds with the ruling military for some time. Meanwhile, the appeals chamber of the International Criminal Court upheld the conviction of Al-Hassan Abdul Aziz Mohammed for war crimes and crimes against humanity. The defense of the former head of the Islamic police of Timbuktu in northern Mali had appealed his conviction before withdrawing. On June 26, 2024, the ICC trial chamber found Abdul Aziz Mohammed guilty of torture, persecution, outrages upon personal dignity, and convictions without a prior trial by a regularly constituted court. Elsewhere, the new World Bank report warns that Liberia risks further economic stagnation and increasing exposure to external shocks. The report, titled Escaping the Natural Resource Trap, Pathways to Sustainable Growth and Economic Diversification in Liberia, highlights sluggish trade growth and shrinking export openness as major threats to the country's long-term stability. Launched on Monday, March 11, the flagship report states that institutional and policy reforms are needed to boost economic growth and development in Liberia. Abdullahi Hassan reports.
The new World Bank flagship report highlights that despite Liberia's abundant natural resources such as iron ore, gold and rubber, the country's trade growth has significantly slowed. This downturn is primarily attributed to the collapse of services exports, a key revenue source that suffered following the withdrawal of the United Nations mission in Liberia and the lingering economic impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. World Bank's country manager for Liberia, Georgia Wallen, is quoted in the report, noting that while goods exports have grown, they have failed to offset the sharp decline in services trade, leaving Liberia lagging behind its West African peers. The report urges Liberia to move beyond its dependency on raw material exports by prioritizing economic diversification. Among its key recommendations is a greater focus on value-added production in agriculture, light manufacturing, and services. Wallen emphasized that a fundamental shift in policy is needed to create an environment that fosters industrial growth, expands export opportunities, and enhances infrastructure. These transformations require fundamental reshaping of Liberia's macroeconomy, shifting away from over-reliance on the mining sector towards activities better aligned with the labor demands and employment needs of an expanding urban population. Additionally, the report recommends transitioning from a state-centric mindset to one that recognizes the private sector as the primary driver of economic expansion and job creation.
Abdullahi Hassan with that report.
More stories coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
We continue in Liberia as the citizens have gathered at various cemeteries across the country on the occasion of the National Decoration Day this Wednesday to honor the death of their departed family members and loved ones. Observed on the second Wednesday of March annually, this national holiday is a time for reflection, remembrance, and gratitude for the contributions made by those who have passed. However, this year's observance has been marred by a troubling trend that has captured the attention and concern of many. The once consecrated grounds for the deceased have fallen prey to acts of desecration, leaving families in deep frustration and sorrow. Elsewhere, the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, is taking decisive action against insecurity in the region. At a high-level defense meeting in Abuja on Tuesday, the regional bloc's leadership approved the activation of its standby force aiming to counter terrorism and other security threats destabilizing West Africa. However, ECOWAS maintains that its doors are still open to welcome back the AES member countries. WADR's Usma Umar reports.
In recent years, West Africa has faced escalating security challenges ranging from jihadist insurgencies in the Sahel to increasing armed violence in coastal states. In response to these threats, the ECOWAS Authority of Heads of State and Government has authorized the deployment of its standby force. Speaking at the 43rd Ordinary Meeting of the ECOWAS Committee of Chiefs of Defense Staff in Abuja, Nigeria's Minister of Defense, Mohammed Badaru, emphasized the critical link between security and economic growth.
By leveraging our collective expertise, resources, and commitment, we can make a tangible impact on fostering peace, stability, and prosperity in the sub-region. In this regard, I am pleased to highlight the activation of the ECOWAS standby force to combat terrorism in the sub-region. The activation of this force underscores our collective determination to confront the scourge of terrorism with regards to insecurity and ensure the safety and security of our citizens.
Nigeria's Chief of Defense Staff, General Christopher Musa, underscored the importance of unity among ECOWAS member states in confronting common threats.
The complexity of the security landscape demands that we leverage our collective expertise, intelligence assets, and coordinate our efforts towards borders if we must solve these challenges as the world has become a global village and the gap between us shrinking even more.
While ECOWAS advances its security framework, the bloc is also keeping diplomatic doors opened. The Commissioner for Political Affairs, Peace and Security, Abdel Fattah Musa, reaffirms the region's commitment to dialogue, particularly with the three Sahelian nations, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, that recently withdrew to form the Alliance of Sahel States.
ECOWAS still has the doors open to welcome back our brothers and sisters from the three countries that have recently withdrawn.
While the standby force now activated, ECOWAS is sending a strong message that it is ready to tackle insecurity while still pursuing diplomatic engagement. For Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, Usman Umar reporting from Abuja.
You are listening to Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Here is a reminder of our top stories. Senegal's former ruling party, APR, denounces travel ban on several features of Macky Sall's regime. Victims of stadium stampede accuse Guinean authorities of being responsible for the death of their loved ones. A new World Bank report says Liberia risks further economic stagnation and increasing exposure to external shocks. Still ahead in the news, a new movement emerges to fight corruption in Togo. We also have the guest interview and a sports update. Please stay with us.
West Africa Democracy Radio. It's you speaking.
Many thanks for staying with us. As a reminder, we are streaming live on YouTube at WADR News and on Facebook, WADR English Service. A new movement has emerged in Togo to combat corruption in the country. Known as the National Liberation Front, FLN, the movement seeks to lead the charge against corruption and arbitrariness within Togo. The front is made up of 13 members in its coordination, alongside 18 groups from diverse sectors, including civil society, politics, and academia. With a focus on unity, the National Liberation Front promised to be a unified force for change in the West African state. This movement aims to be at the forefront of the fight against corruption. Dr. Kumlan, the coordinating president of the National Liberation Front, outlines the movement's objectives, followed by a doctor like those of the APLA in Togo.
The first objective is to fight for the liberation of political prisoners so that they can safely return home without condition. The second objective is to ensure that all Togolese who are in asylum for political reasons can return to their homeland where we are living. Some of them have been there for 30 years, and when they come home, their parents are dead. They couldn't attend their parents' burials. We will make sure that they return to the home. General amnesty and then the transition. It is fundamental. Everything that is done today is fake. The truth is in the hands of the DMK. We need an inclusive transition to be able to take care of all the Togolese, discuss and see the decisions to be taken. This front is not like any other. It is a front composed of young people that you would not find in other fronts. If you make a synoptic analysis of other fronts, you will see that these fronts are always composed of elderly, uninspiring people who have nevertheless made up the pile that normally should have gone through the same thing.
Those are some officials of the National Liberation Front, a new movement aiming to fight corruption in Togo. To some other news, data from the Ivorian government indicates that the country recorded more than 9,600 cases of gender-based violence in 2024 alone. This figure was announced by Dr. Fofana FC Benati Namizata, Gender Technical Advisor in charge of Regional Cooperation at the Ivorian Ministry of Women, Family and Children. She disclosed on Tuesday during the weekly forum for exchange and information at the Government Information and Communication Center in Abidjan, held under the theme Promotion of Women's Rights in Côte d'Ivoire. Dr. Fofana also spoke about progress in promoting women's rights in the country. Francis Boniface has the details in this report.
According to Dr. Fofana Ipse Binate Namizata, the 9,607 reported cases of gender-based violence in Côte d'Ivoire pose a significant obstacle to the empowerment of women. She emphasized that these acts of violence also hinder women's participation in the nation's development.
In 2024, 9,607 cases of gender-based violence were reported, including 920 cases of rape, 287 sexual assaults, 25 female genital mutilations, 4,394 denial of resources, opportunities and services. There is a phenomenon that has become very recurrent, which is femicide.
However, the Gender Technical Advisor in charge of regional cooperation at the Ivorian Ministry of Women, Family and Children believes that progress has been made in advancing women's rights, particularly with the adoption of the Family Code in 2019.
First, within the family itself, we now have joint management of family assets. Since this law, a woman can be the head of the family. This is a recognition of woman's responsibility. A woman can give her name to her child. If she wants, she can also carry carry her name instead of her husband's. A woman can decide to persuade the profession she wants without asking the husband's opinion, which was not the case before.
In 2023, health authorities in Côte d'Ivoire reported 8,782 cases of gender-based violence. In response, a national program has been established to combat this issue. The program is responsible for addressing all forms of violence, with efforts including awareness-raising campaigns and providing care to survivors of GBV.
Details of Albin Ade's report from Abidjan, voiced by Francis Boniface. Authorities in Nigeria have declared an outbreak of meningitis in the northwest of the country. The spread of the disease in the state of Kebbi began late January and resulted in the death of 26 people, with over 200 suspected cases so far recorded. This latest development was confirmed by Kebbi State Commissioner for Health Musa Ismail. Imo Edit has the details.
Kebbi State Commissioner Musa Ismail also said medical supplies have already been dispatched to the affected areas, an isolation center set up to prevent the further spread of the disease. Sokoto, another state in the northwest and about 150 kilometers away from Kebbi, has urged residents to remain vigilant after several cases were reported. Sokoto State Commissioner of Health Farouk Abubakar said residents should take precautionary measures and seek immediate medical attention at the nearest health facility if they are experiencing symptoms such as high fever, stiff neck and severe headaches. Meningitis, more common during the hot season in Nigeria, is a significant public health challenge that affects the protective membranes surrounding the brain and a spinal cord. Additionally to this communicable disease, Nigeria is also battling malaria and has the highest burden in the world. Nigeria previously received aid from the United States Agency for International Development to combat these diseases, but that support has recently been withdrawn. Between 2022 and 2023, Nigeria, located in an area known as the African Meningitis Belt, recorded 2,765 suspected cases and 190 deaths, according to the Nigeria Center for Disease Control and Prevention, NCDC.
Imo Edit with that report. In Benin, the year 2026 will be marked by the simultaneous holding of presidential, legislative and municipal elections. Ahead of those elections, a delegation from the opposition consultation framework met with the National Autonomous Electoral Commission, SINA, on Tuesday. The meeting, which was chaired by the chairman of SINA, Saka Lafia, provided an opportunity to discuss the level of arrangements for organizing these upcoming elections. Meanwhile, Antonin Gedu Visitogbe, president of the Grand Solidarity Republican Party and spokesperson for the opposition consultation framework, outlined the key concerns of the opposition. These include the recruitment of electoral agents and district coordinators, as well as access to the list of candidates. This meeting marked the first engagement between the opposition and the SINA, as both sides agreed to continue discussions to ensure an inclusive electoral process in full compliance with legal provisions.
Politics, analyses on major news, social matters, and all. This is A Guest.
Our guest this evening is Frederick Foromoloa, one of the lawyers representing the families of the victims of the tragedy in Nzirikore, Guinea. Nearly 100 families lodged a complaint against the transition authorities on Monday. Here is Frederick, one of the lawyers, speaking.
Yes, that because of the seriousness of the event that took place in Nzirikore on December 1, 2024. You will recall that it was a tragedy when the authorities in their propaganda campaign decided to organize a football tournament with the trophy of the president of the transition, General Mamadou Doumbouya. So, without the appropriate measures being taken, the stadium was still under construction. That day, the stadium was filled to capacity and the town was overly populated. The servants were in the process of transporting all their children and everyone to the stadium without any appropriate safety measures being taken. So, the NGOs initially published an interim report, which was followed by a final report, and it was only after the publication of these reports that the victims were organized into an association. In addition, there are more than 80 victim families, and it is on behalf of these 80 families that a complaint has been launched with the tribunal. This complaint covers a series of offenses, including murder, assassination, failure to assist people in danger, obstruction of justice, enforced disappearance, and concealment of bodies. So, it's a series of offenses that are targeted in the complaints brought against the organizers of the event, but also against the military authorities and the authorities at the highest level of learning.
And what are your expectations following your complaint?
In terms of expectations, we want justice to be done and for responsibilities to be clarified so that we know what happened and that sanctions are applied, because it is incomprehensible that such an event could take place without the authorities at the highest level even agreeing to make a speech or a press release on the matter. It's a total silence. The authorities don't want to talk about it. There haven't even been any support measures for the victims. You remember that some families have lost children, others 3 children, and most of the people who died that day at the stadium were children. Because of everything I have just said, we have decided to complain on behalf of these victims, and we hope that there will be a speedy justice and that the sector will be held accountable in this case.
Has there been any reaction or measures taken by the government following your complaint?
Yes, when the complaint was lodged, a series of decrees followed. The mayor of the town was relieved of his duties. The governor was transferred as the prefect. So, these were the measures taken by the authorities following the lodging of our complaints.
That was Frederick Oforomo Loa, one of the lawyers representing victims' families at the Nzirikoro stampede in Guinea. Now, in the world of sports, the president of the Confederation of the African Football, CAF, Dr. Patrice Mustifi, and the African Club Association chairman, Hensi, have signed a historic memorandum of understanding in Cairo, Egypt, to strengthen partnership between the two football bodies and promote growth and development of the game. Though in the signing ceremony, the ACA commended CAF President Dr. Mustifi for increasing financial support for club football, and this included the US $50,000 solidarity fee given to all clubs that participated in the preliminary stages of the CAF Interclub competition. With that, we've come to the end of this edition of Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Thank you for listening, and many thanks to Maodo Diouf, including Omon Danyogo, for the technical support. To interact with us via our social media platforms, X, formerly Twitter, Instagram at WADR News, and on Facebook, WADR English Service. I am Augustine Cully. Good evening.
And many thanks to you for listening to Newslink via Hot 104.3 FM, New Me FM 94.